and welcome to Top Talk. Today I'm joined by Paul from Discover Brightwater. So welcome, Paul. It's nice to have you here. If you'd like to tell us a bit more about you and your role at Brightwater and what Brightwater do.
So I'm the program manager at Brightwater. My background is weird, but you'll see it kind of fits with what Brightwater's all about. So my early career, I mostly spent as a TV producer. So this is a very comfortable setting for me. I was also involved in training people on programs. I was then in charge of producers and directors and production staff up at Tyne Tees for a number of years. Then moved into consultancy, and for a number of years I worked initially with people like PricewaterhouseCoopers as a management consultant, and then in more recent years specialised in sustainability and climate change and how do companies reduce their carbon footprint and at the same time save money and tread gently on the planet. And through a roundabout way, that got me involved in the kind of environmental groups in the Northeast. And I heard about this job, which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And it's called a Landscape Partnership. And they've been running these for a few years. The idea of a Landscape Partnership is you bring together a whole bunch of different stakeholders. In this case, it happens to be local authorities, local businesses, landowners, the Durham Wildlife Trust, who lead it, that's who I work for, Tees Rivers Trust, who specialise in cleaning up the river and things, Environment Agency, Highways England. So all the right people sat around a table in the partnership. And the idea is, right, we're all here, what we're going to do. And the Brightwater Landscape Partnership is based around the River Skerne. Now, the Skerne is one of those rivers that most people haven't heard of, but back in the 1970s, it was kind of quite notorious because it was Europe's 7th most polluted river. And it's a little river that starts up near the Trimdons in Durham and then wends its way. It's unusual in that sense. It doesn't go straight to the coast. It wends its way inland for about 20 odd miles, past Sedgefield, past Newton Aycliffe, into Darlington, and eventually joins up with the River Tees near Herworth and Croft, just south of Darlington. And the word Brightwater comes from a translation of what the word Skerne might have meant, because they reckon it's an old Viking word, skr, meaning bright. And so the idea is Brightwater. Now, there is another Viking word which means rubbish, which is the same word, or sounds the same, and so it could have been rubbish water, but we decided that actually on marketing balance, Brightwater was better than rubbish water. But what's interesting is depending where you live on the Skerne, that could be your view, because up in certain areas like Herworth Burn, beautiful reservoir up at the source of the river, heron, swans, wild birds. It's a lovely piece of countryside up by Trimdon. And then you come through various agricultural lands till you get to Newton Aycliffe and Darlington, where it's not quite as pristine as perhaps you'd like it to be. One of the things that we do in Brightwater, apart from cleaning up the Skerne, which is one of our tasks, is we celebrate the area. We look at the archaeology and the heritage. So we've done everything from digging up parts of Sedgefield, where we think there's the biggest non-military Roman site in the north of England. We've been digging up in Bishop Midlam, which is where the original bishops' castles for the bishops of Durham were. And we've discovered that's a lot bigger than it was thought. But if you're interested in archaeology, in central Darlington, in the River Skerne, there are specialists who are interested in late 20th century shopping trolleys, and rubber tyres are finding them really interesting. No, so part of what we're doing is cleaning up the river, but we're also getting out there, finding out what's in the patch. And the other thing that we're doing is we're creating a new wetland. So this whole area in the Tees Lowlands used to be wetlands and fens and cars. So if you drive through this area, every so often you see a sign for Preston Cars or Morden Cars or whatever it is. and a car is a Viking word meaning basically a boggy forest or a woody bog. And so that's what the land really wants to be like. Now, what happened in our history, of course, is that we in the Northeast were terribly good at industry, and we learned how to do clever things with steam engines, which enabled us to do all sorts of things with coal mines, including pump the water out from coal mines so that people could go deeper underground to hew out the coal. And so for 150 years in the Durham coal field, we pumped water out. In fact, it wasn't until we switched off the pumps when we closed the mines back in the 1970s and 80s did we realize we'd taken 70 meters of water out. And so in recent years, farmers have seen bits of their land going underwater in a way that their fathers and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers hadn't seen before. And that's because the land is going back to what it wants to be. And so part of what Brightwater's about is working with the landowners and the farmers to see how can we work with the land, how can we help people to make what is becoming increasingly difficult land to farm, how can we help them make some money through a better use of the environment, how can we help them to make some money through using things like what's called natural flood management. So, you know, it may be easier to flood a field upstream than it is to build 6-foot flood defences downstream. So we're looking at the whole piece in this area is how the River Skerne can really kind of come back to life, how we celebrate the people and the culture, the archaeology and the landscape. So that's what Brightwater's all about.
So really varied and interesting sort of.
There's nothing not to like about Brightwater. It's paid for by all you good people who, you know, buy your scratch cards or your lottery money, and a percentage of all of that goes to the good causes. We're one of the good causes via the National Lottery Heritage Fund that gets money. And because it's a big slug, we're getting just under 3 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, plus money from the Environment Agency, from Highways England and other groups, and both Darlington Borough Council and Durham County Council are putting energy into this and resources as well as their staff. We've got a kind of £4 million to make a difference over a 4-year period. We're about halfway through now at Brightwater. We've already kind of done about a 10-mile stretch of the Skerne, which is being improved, and the water qualities are getting better. We're in the middle of just setting up the Bishop's Fen, which is going to be a new wetland nature reserve, which Durham Wildlife Trust are going to manage. We're working with people like the National Railway Museum at Shildon. We're working on lots of areas to improve access, both for cyclists and for walkers. So in the next couple of years, expect to see a whole range of kind of new walks that are clearly waymarked, and some of the walks that have been around for a while, getting those tidied up and spruced up a bit so that people can really enjoy them again.
Okay, so what's the most enjoyable bit for you then? Which bit's the most interesting?
I think for me, it's the big opportunity. It's the National Lottery talk about what they call in-between places, right? So Brightwater is an in-between place, right? This part of Durham, we're in between Tyneside and North Yorkshire. We're in between the Dales and the Northern Pennines. But nobody thinks, oh, let's go to that part of Durham for a day out. And so part of what we're trying to do is to first off with local people say, look, have a look at what's on the doorstep. You've got Hardwick Park, you've got all this fantastic railway heritage, we've got ancient sites that the Romans and the Vikings were involved in. You've got some lovely little villages, some great pubs, you've got all sorts of stuff that when COVID-19 is, you know, a thing of the past and we all sit back and say, my God, that was grim, wasn't it? But we're out there enjoying our pints in the pubs that are left. it's celebrating what we've got. So start with local people, and then let the rest of the Northeast know. On your doorstep, you've got all this amazing history, some bits of landscape that perhaps you haven't seen before. We've got some really interesting wetland and wild bird sanctuaries in this area, and it's about letting people know that. Think about somewhere like Hardwick Park. So Hardwick Park, about 15 years ago, was a bit sad and a bit kind of a bit shabby. It lost its former era. It's been renovated, spruced up, refurbished. It's getting 450,000 visitors a year at Hardwick Park. Great day out for the kids. So we're adding to what they've done there. We're doing our little bit, and we're trying to extend Hardwick Park's walk so that just north of it, between Hardwick Park and Bishop Midland, there's going to be this Bishop's Fen, a new nature reserve. So it's about building on what we've already got, but absolutely celebrating the life, the humour, the resilience of the people, and the ingenuity. I mean, we've got some fantastic stories.
Yeah, until we started working with you guys, I didn't realise how much was actually there for being from a bit further south, being from Edinburgh. I didn't realise how much was around the area, and again, seeing some of the pictures that get posted on social media and some of the bits you've sent to us for the maps and things like that, it's really opened my eyes, and I'm looking forward to getting back out and exploring some of this, especially with my daughter, because I think it looks, again, there's so much there and such a variety from the sort of the archaeology side of things and the wetlands and the birds and everything. It's really, really varied, and I don't think we shout about it enough. And I think the more we can get your message out to people, the better. But again, you touched on COVID-19 there. How has that sort of changed the way you're working at the minute? How has it changed your goals for the year with things like your events and things like that? Have they had to move to further in the year? Have you been able to put them online, things like that?
Yeah, so like everyone else, COVID-19 has caused us it stopped us in our tracks, and we've had to rethink everything. Now, fortunately, because of some of our work is happening outdoors in rivers and fields that aren't kind of big labour intensive stuff, we're able to continue with some of our construction bits and pieces. Two men in a field with a dumper truck and an excavator can work safely. Getting 40 people in a small trench looking for artifacts from the Romans, that's a bit more problematical. So we've had to postpone some of our archaeology stuff. That said, we're doing more online. We've revamped our website, and you guys have done a great job revamping the website for us. And the purpose of our website isn't just to say, oh, this is what we're doing, these are our projects, this is about the area. We've got a long-term objective which was set for us by the National Lottery people, which is to set up what's called an eco-museum. So an eco-museum is basically a museum without walls. Now, the word eco-museum doesn't do anything for me, because it says eco and it says museum, and I don't have an image of it. So what we've said is, look, I've got a working title. We've called it Skirnopolis. Now, Skirnopolis is our area, and I've no idea whether that will become anything, whether it will become a visitor attraction, whether it's a board game, whether it's a website to visit. I've no idea, or whether it's an app. But the idea is to free people's minds as to how do you curate a whole region. So in other words, if I'm a visitor to this part of the world in the future, they should be able to come to our website and find out about the places they're going to see, the animals that are in the area, the wildlife, the plants, what the historical story is, what the Quakers did in Darlington. Quakers, not just the football team, but I'm talking about the religious group who were very, very influential in Darlington. One of the Backhouse family went on to become part of the Barclays Bank empire. Edward Pease, a Quaker, was the man who put the money into building the Stockton-Darlington Railway, and various other folks were involved in the engineering and all the rest. So really influential piece. So all of this is, if you come to our place, or if you're sat at home somewhere on the other side of the planet and you're looking for interesting places to come and visit and things to do, how can we make that accessible for people? So this map I've got behind me was one of the first things that we commissioned. So it's a schematic. It's letting people know this is an area of interest. It looks like a tourist map. And on the website, we've got places that people can click on, and it begins to lead them to other bits of information, a bit like Encarta, the museum, the encyclopedia online that was a few years back, so that you can start to explore different bits and pieces. And we're also starting to do more video. We've been talking to people for oral history purposes. We've been recording the things that we found on the archaeology digs, so people can actually tap in there and have a look at what's in the area. So that's, for us, part of our legacy, that when we're here for a couple more years, this is going to continue.
Excellent, that's good to hear. So you mentioned there the archaeological digs. What's the most interesting thing you found on one of these? I'm intrigued.
What I found, I think, because I haven't been on them, I'm sat in the office making sure the money's paid for these good people. There's a fantastic company in Barnard Castle called Dig Ventures, and these people are revolutionising the way community archaeology is happening. And I would say that the most exciting thing I found was how they work with communities to tap into their love for their own area and their knowledge of history, and they bring the experts together with the genuinely passionate about my patch, and kind of magical things happen. So they're working with us to produce a series of things called village atlases over some of the different villages. We're starting off with Sedgefield and Bishop Midland, and it's how does a community tell its own story? Everything from ancient ecology, what grew here 10,000 years ago? What did the Romans eat? How did the Vikings get across from there to there when there were no roads, etc., etc.? What's that big lump of stone at the bottom of my garden? And it's working with the schools, working with the grandparents who remember what their dad used to do when he worked down in the pit or in the brewery or whatever it was. So it's really tapping into a community's kind of communal memories and their knowledge, and then bringing, as I say, the experts in who can put it into a wider context of history. Really exciting.
Yeah. Again, I suppose one of the positive things that's come out of this COVID situation is that people are exploring the local vicinity more as well, aren't they? So they're talking about communities and things. I know we've been out for walks out the back of where we live and through the fields and different footpaths, and I've had the old maps out, just sort of seeing where we can go and trying to avoid people, but see, just exploring a lot more. And I think that must have had sort of a benefit to you guys with what's around the Skern, and again, people discovering it, things and then looking up to try and find out where they can find more information on those things.
I think that's true, and I mean, we're working with you guys to produce a series of maps, and the first couple are out there now, and we've tried to find a design that says, look, you don't have to be a fully fledged 75-year-old rambler who's spent the last 50 years of your life climbing up mountains, and it's accessible for everybody. So how do you make a walk family friendly? How do you do it in a way that reminds people there's stuff they should be watching out for? What are the birds they might see when they're going around? What are the insects? What are the plants? What's that thing that you by the side of the track? Well, actually, it's an old railway station. Or in fact, the track itself is an old railway line, whatever it is. So it's just bringing to life some of those bits and pieces in a way that, as I say, you don't have to be an expert kind of countryman or countrywoman. It's about ordinary folks having a day out or an hour out, whatever it is. We're putting the times, how easy the walk is. So you can literally say, is this one to take the kids? Is this one that I could encourage my folks who are finding it a bit tricky climbing over stiles and things now? or is this one that is it wheelchair accessible? Things like that. So we're trying to make as much of the patch accessible to as many people as possible.
Excellent. Yeah. Again, from having seen some of the maps that we've been working on there, it's nice, and I'm looking forward to being able to give them to my daughter and say, look, let's go out, let's explore near where Daddy works, and find out a bit more. And I know she'll enjoy it. And again, there's so much for her to see. So really looking forward to that. Definitely. Right. Well, a little bit of fun now. It's what we call the Lemontop this or that. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and you just have to pick between two things, and then just gives people a little bit more of an insight into you, I guess. So we'll start with tea or coffee.
Coffee.
Summer or winter.
Spring.
Oh, formal or casual.
Yes.
Night owl or early bird.
Early bird.
Teleportation or time travel.
What was the first one?
Teleportation.
Time travel.
Books or films.
Books.
Instagram or Twitter.
What are they?
Cats or dogs.
Both.
Sweet or savoury.
Depends what time of the day you ask, but probably savoury.
Beach or mountains.
A combination of the two, with a river and a woodland put in as well.
Hotel or camping.
Self-catering cottages.
Muddy field or museum.
Skirnopolis.
Brilliant. Woodland or wetland.
Car.
Oh, and one last question. Have you ever had a Lemontop ice cream?
I don't think I have.
Oh, well, we'll have to rectify that, definitely. Once we can do it safely, definitely.
I have had my Brightwater beer, which you guys kindly organised for us, which was a promotional beer, which we found a really useful tool. And I think tapping into your knowledge of that sector was really useful for us.
I'm glad it seemed to go down well at the launch event anyway. So
yeah, it was so well that there was none left for me on the day, if I remember rightly. Not that I've twisted or anything, but those of you who took more than your fair share, just be aware that some of us didn't get any.
Oh, so is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners before we say goodbye?
Well, I mean, in terms of the Brightwater, we're work in progress. We're one chapter of a whole history of an area that develops. But when I used to work in television, which is the early part of my career, I thought I knew the whole of the Northeast, down from Bamborough down to York and Harrogate way. That was my patch. And it was only when I heard out about Brightwater and I began to look carefully at places like Newton Aycliffe, Darlington, Sedgefield, the villages, Hindon, places like that. I realized that I didn't know this area. And actually, you're looking at the first economic benefit of Brightwater, in the sense that my wife and I like the area so much. We've bought a house in Darlington at the West Park Garden Village there. Since then, one of our kids and his family have moved there. So what Brightwater represents is already, and this was before the project was up and running, 4 economically active adults had bought 2 houses in the patch. And that's the power of things like a project like this. And as people are promoting what we do and promoting the area, it actually brings the whole place to the attention of people who weren't aware of this hidden gem, weren't aware of the quiet, unassuming, but really resilient people that live around here. Tremendous strengths, and the kind of COVID-19, it's a pandemic. None of us have lived through anything like this before. And I've got to say, I think the way that certainly the people in this area are actually complying with what's required, and we're all rethinking what it means for our businesses, for our families, for our lives, but we're doing it in a way that is kind of really resilient. And I've got to say, I'm really proud about the way as a group we're handling all of this.
Definitely. I think, again, it's pulled a lot of people together, I think, hasn't it? And and open people's eyes to what's around them, and the people and places around them as well. So I think it's that type of things going forward.
If you think about how angry people were and how fractured the community was over Brexit, and then when something that was life-threatening and really kind of impacting us all on a day-to-day basis, how quickly that changed, and how quickly people remembered to be caring and compassionate and looking out for each other, and just checking that the little old guy at the end of the road, or the single mum with a kid, somebody was looking out for them. That for me has spoken volumes about the area and the communities that we're living in.
Definitely. So a nice positive note to end on. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Okay, cheers now. Take care.
Bye.